Our electrical bills have started to drop. We qualified for energy tax credits to help pay for the windows. And we even took advantage of their expertise and replaced our sliding glass deck door with one that has a pet door built in. Look, I know you don't make a decision like this on a whim. You do your research. So do that. But make sure you call Advanced Window Products at 801-850-9100, and you can get a special deal of $3,000 off 10 windows or more if you mention Andy when you make the appointment. 801-850-9100 or go to advancedwindows.com.
Don't you love this time of year? Fabulous fall colors amongst Red Rock Views and Cedar Breaks in Dixie National Forest. You should take a drive where you'll no doubt enjoy 4 scenic highways connecting you to the most amazing fall colors you will ever see. Put the U back in Utah, because it's all about the journey you create. This fall, see you in Cedar City. If you like nature, start your journey with a stunning hike for the best scenic views and vibrant colors. Or how about mountain biking and OHVing? You will enjoy all the fun fall events, like the charm of an organic farmer's market. Be sure you include a visit to the best pumpkin patches in the West. And don't miss out on the annual sheep parade down Cedar City's Main Street, October 26th. You will definitely get it all this fall in Cedar City. To plan your journey and for Cedar City's updated fall color report, activities, and cool foodie places to go, visit cedarcity.com.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
Crews are still working to clear this crash, but they're almost done. Westbound I-80 at 7th East, no delay, but watch for that over to the left. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
It'll be warm with high clouds today. The high of 88 could tie the record for the date. Highs will stay in the 80s through the weekend. 82 degrees and mostly cloudy right now. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, the primary issue for voters, of course, always remains to have something to do with the economy and what can actually be done about it. But we want to think again about what we think we know when it comes to the economy, because you have the actual state of the economy versus the story of the economy. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, it is time to think again. Very interesting as the economy continues to move forward. A lot of the conversation is starting to shift a little bit in terms of who has the advantage, especially when it comes to the presidential contest, when it comes to the economy. And as things change, as things improve, the stories also change from both political campaigns for the presidency. And so we want to dig into that a little bit, look behind the scenes and underneath the headlines. And as we often do, we turn to Catherine Rampell, an opinion columnist at the Washington Post. And Catherine, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's dig into this. Obviously, some of the numbers have settled. Some of them started to improve. And as that has happened, the advantage that the Trump campaign seemed to have when it comes to who handles the economy better has started to shift. And so has the story.
Yes, exactly. Historically, for at least the last decade, let's say, Republicans have had a major advantage among voters when voters are asked which party they trust more on the economy. And that has been doubly true, it seems, for Donald Trump throughout this election cycle. However, while Trump is still in the lead in most surveys over Kamala Harris, his advantage has shrunk significantly. So if you look back, for example, at how Trump versus Biden compared a few months ago when Biden was still the Democratic nominee, the average margin over which Trump, bested Biden was about 12 percentage points, and now it's about half that for Kamala Harris. In fact, in some very recent polls, the advantage has basically disappeared, and they're neck and neck. So, like, for example, there was a recent poll from Cook Political Report that was just in swing states, and they found that Trump's advantage on inflation and the cost of living had completely evaporated. On some other issues, depends how you phrase the question, of course, he still does better. But it is interesting that that wedge has shrunk quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. Now, we've talked about it often, the challenge for President Biden and initially for Vice President Harris was sort of this idea and challenge that the economy was improving. Things were getting better, but the story they were telling about wins and their successes wasn't really congruent with what the American people were experiencing around their own kitchen table. But somehow they've managed to pivot, and you got into that pivot a little bit in terms of the messaging side. Kind of break that down for us in terms of what the Harris campaign has been able to do to pivot the message and kind of reframe the economy.
Sure. So I think on most policy issues, like the things that are actually in Kamala Harris's agenda, they're directionally very similar to those that the Biden-Harris administration has embraced. Things like raising taxes on billionaires or expanding paid leave or other kinds of things that you might sort of put in that realm of economic issues, kitchen table type issues, cracking down on greedy corporations, that sort of thing. So, substantively, it's pretty similar with some changes around the edges. But I think one rhetorical change that others have pointed out before is that Kamala Harris has shifted away a little bit from talking about inflation per se and more towards talking about cost of living. Now, they're obviously very related concepts. A lot of voters might use the terms almost interchangeably. Inflation technically means how much, prices are going up, how quickly they're growing. Cost of living, you might think of as more as sort of static state. How much are we paying for things now? But they're related. I do think that the image that either of those terms conjures up is slightly different, right? Inflation is sort of a little bit more backward looking, like how much growth have we seen to date in prices? How much should we compare things versus the past? Cost of living might subconsciously, at the very least, conjure up more ideas about like, how much is my rent now? What can be done to change it? What kinds of changes to regulation or subsidies or other kinds of opportunities might be different. And my guess is that's a pretty deliberate change in verbiage for the Harris campaign.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think from a framing standpoint, it makes it much more tangible and real and also forward-looking as opposed to backward-facing, as you mentioned. I think that's where they were really struggling to kind of line up what we're going after versus what people were experiencing. So I think that specific always seems to help voters kind of lock it into something tangible and real and something that it is going to impact moving forward. What else are you looking at? What else do you sense or see out there in terms of the framing from both sides of the campaigns in terms of what they're going to do down this less than a month away to Election Day?
Yeah, so as I said, I think it's interesting that Republicans and Trump in particular have generally had an advantage on the economy. And as I said, some of that advantage has been eroding. And part of the reason for that may be about these rhetorical changes from Kamala Harris. I also think that Trump himself hasn't done in his campaign any favors lately, in part because, he's proposed universal tariffs, which maybe sound appealing on their face, but if you think about it for a few minutes, those tariffs are likely to be at least in part passed on to consumers, which will raise prices for consumers. So to the extent that voters are thinking about that and hearing analysis about that, that may degrade his advantage on the economy, particularly if they care about prices and if they do care about inflation. A few of his other ideas, I think, are also quite harmful to the economy, but I'm not sure that they're really top of mind for voters. Like, I'm worried about politicizing the Federal Reserve because I think that would be very bad for inflation. I don't know that most voters are paying attention to it. So I would say that, he hasn't done himself any favors. The other thing that I think is really important here is that the U.S. economy, as you alluded to, actually is doing quite well by all of the traditional metrics, almost all of the traditional metrics, with one big asterisk. The U.S. economy is doing quite well. We've added a lot of job gains, including this past month, where the job growth just exploded what were economists' expectations. Inflation has cooled quite a bit. Again, people are still frustrated and resentful about that. That's the asterisk I was talking about.
Yeah.
But prices have largely stabilized. It looks like we're back on track to get price growth to where it was historically. GDP growth has been really strong, and a lot of other metrics have looked really, really good. Now, most of the things I just ticked off have been true for a while. We have had strong job growth and low unemployment for a while. We've had a strong GDP growth, especially when compared to the rest of the world. We have much stronger economic output growth than basically every other peer country out there. Those things have been the case for a while. So then the question might be, well, why would anyone think that matters now? Or why would that, sort of narrow the gap now between the Democratic and the Republican candidates? And I think it's partly just about that one thing that has been bothering people that we've been talking about, inflation, cost of living, whatever you want to call it. I think the fact that prices have stabilized means that people are getting a little bit more acclimated to the price growth that we saw previously, right? The main thing that people are annoyed about is how much prices went up in 2022 and 2023.
Right.
And there has been this expectation that is unrealistic that prices would go back down. But the general price level almost never goes back down. Over time, prices trend upward overall. And just as we've had, years or decades to get used to the fact that a cup of coffee is no longer 5 cents, now it's $50 or whatever. Now we are getting used to some of that sharp price growth that we saw a year or so ago. Yeah. We're getting more acclimated to it. Maybe consumers are facing a little bit less sticker shock each time that they go to the grocery store, so this is less salient for them. Yeah. So I guess my point is, I don't know that the economy is ever going to be a winning issue per se for Kamala Harris, but I think it's less likely to be an albatross around her neck, in part because the things that people were so frustrated by maybe becoming a little bit less salient in their lives.
Great perspective as always, Catherine Rampell, opinion columnist at The Washington Post. You can check out her piece at thewashingtonpost.com. Catherine, thanks for breaking that down for us as always. Fantastic perspective. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
All right, that's Catherine Rampell, and I think she's really hit something that's important. It's not that things have gotten better or things have gone down. They clearly haven't, but we've gotten used to it. And so there's a kind of a settling effect that goes with that. And I also think that the vice president has done a better job in the messaging department in terms of telling the story of the economy. And so before, the status of the economy, the actual status was improving, but the story was so disconnected from the experience of the American people that it continued to give Republicans a big advantage in that space. So they've changed the story a little bit, and the status has kind of come a little bit more in alignment. So I think there's more understanding there. The question will be what happens between now and that first Tuesday of November this year. And will people continue to feel that things are getting better, or will they just be comfortable enough where they are, or will there be something that causes them to maybe think again about what's happening around their kitchen table? We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Election Day will be here before we know it. Join KSL News Radio every Tuesday and Thursday between now and November 4th for political coverage without the rhetoric and finger-pointing. You'll get conversations with the candidates, details on how to make sure your vote counts, and stories that will help you make informed decisions at the ballot box. Every Tuesday and Thursday, all of our shows will be diving deep for Your Voice, Your Vote 2024 on KSL News Radio.
We all want a stressless holiday season. With soda weight loss, you'll have far fewer reasons to stress at all. With state-of-the-art weight loss, you won't have to stress about fitting into your holiday outfit. You won't have to stress about how you look in the family photo. You'll stress less about emotional eating. Now, for me, my soda dietitian and coach took the stress out of losing weight for me, and they will for you too. I lost 37 pounds in 90 days. I've kept it off, stress-free, for nearly 3 years. So stress less about the potentially dangerous fat loss drugs. Stress less about pills and injections. Stress less about the crazy and sometimes dangerous side effects. We want to stress less, and you want to stress less, especially for the holidays. So get rid of the pounds and inches that are causing you the stress. Do it with Soda Weight Loss. I always say when it comes to your Soda weight loss journey, there's no time to lose, only time to win. So stress less, start winning, and start losing that unwanted weight. Have a stressless holiday season. You can check it out at sodaweightloss.com. That's SOTA weightloss.com.
Have you ever heard of the 5 Ps? That's right, the 5 Ps. These can be applied to most every area of your life, but it's especially true for you and your money. I'm Jeff Jr. with Trajan Wealth, and many years ago when I was a young man in the Marine Corps, I learned about the 5 Ps. Proper planning prevents poor performance. Now, you can't control what's happening with the stock market, but you can control how you plan for it. Trajan Wealth and our fiduciary advisors have been helping our clients with the 5 Ps for years. We have hearts of teachers and will never complicate by using financial jargon. Our fee structure is transparent. The more you make, the more we make. The majority of our clients come from other financial advisors. Isn't it time for a second opinion to allow Trajan Wealth to help you with the 5 Ps too? Call Trajan today at 801-899-7600 or visit TrajanWealth.com.
Advisory services offered through Trajan Wealth LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor.
Already, Dee and I have 2 very special events planned for Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. We've got a birthday and we've got an anniversary to celebrate in the month of October. And of course, it just wouldn't be a grand celebration without Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. And sometimes, too, you just need, not want, you need the perfectly cooked steak. Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, nobody does it better. And it's prepared exactly the way you want it. Now, Dee, she likes her steak a little more well done than I do. I like mine medium. I like ribeye. She likes hers a filet. And sometimes they will butterfly it so it's cooked absolutely to her taste. Then those side dishes are off the charts. The dessert, you've got to save room for dessert when you're going to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. This is the time, just like Dee and I have done, make your reservation. Celebrate that great occasion at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, downtown Salt Lake City, and of course, Hotel Park City.
Whether you own a local business or a global one, you're always looking for ways to position your operation to create opportunities and move on them faster. With Bank of America, you get access to experts, award-winning insights, and business solutions so powerful, you'll make every move matter, locally and globally. Visit bankofamerica.com/banking for business to learn more. What would you like the power to do? Copyright 2024 Bank of America N.A.
Tommy! I can't wait for golf this weekend, huh, buddy? Time flies. Love you, man. Oh, don't forget your knee brace again. We aren't in college anymore.
Moments together matter, so help protect yourself from RSV. If you're 75 or older or 60 plus with a chronic condition like asthma, COPD, heart disease, or severe diabetes, you're at higher risk of landing in the hospital from RSV, and there are no prescription RSV treatments. Check eligibility and schedule your RSV vaccine at vaxassist.com. Sponsored by Pfizer.
Getting help with electrical repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, while we won't see a hurricane in Utah, the state says there's a lot we can do to be ready for other emergencies. Second, Democrats in Congress say the House needs to come back into session to approve additional funding for disaster relief. And third, storms in the South could be the reason unemployment claims are rising. 82 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today, as always. And, of course, the Supreme Court has reconvened for the 2024-2025 terms. And, of course, all eyes are looking at what is to come. Docket's brimming with all kinds of consequential cases and a few areas where you wonder, where are the priorities in terms of what kinds of cases they're going to be hearing? And as always, we turn to the expert of all experts when it comes to Supreme Court. Kelsey Dallas for the Deseret News always helps us break all of this down, among a host of other things she helps us with. Kelsey, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, it's that time of year. The game is on. Court is in session. What are you watching?
Well, a big question for me, and we've talked about this before, is will there be a religious freedom case, a First Amendment religious exercise case this term? Because there wasn't one last year.
Right.
The court hasn't heard one since April 2023.
Wow. And let's dig into that a little bit in terms of what does that really tell us? Like you, I often watch to see what are they going to do around those kinds of cases, and it's been a minute. What does that tell us about the makeup of the court, the priorities of the court, what Justice Roberts as the head justice there, what he's trying to drive? What does that tell us?
Well, if you ask the justices, I think they would say that simply means that they haven't had an appeal that they feel needs the court's attention. In other words, I don't think they will admit to saying, like, this is part of some grand scheme to turn down the temperature on culture wars or something like that. Maybe the truth is somewhere in between those two possible answers. And what I mean by that is that the court may think, okay, we've had some very significant religious freedom rulings in the past decade. Now we need to sit back and wait and see what is bubbling up as far as lingering questions and concerns, because the Supreme Court doesn't have the bandwidth to work out tiny details year after year after year. It has to sort of think and wait and watch and say, okay, clearly this needs some additional insights and we do need to weigh in, but otherwise they're not going to jump at the chance to refine the exact same issue every term.
Yeah, that's really important insight, Kelsey, because I think a lot of folks look at it and say, oh, they got to deal with this, they got to deal with that. But a lot of times it is the nuanced things that need tweaking or adjusting or fixing at the margins. But they can't do that every single time. And there's also some wisdom in that, I think, in terms of just waiting and letting some of this settle and then seeing what still continues to bubble up. Are there any cases out there that you're keeping your eye on that could potentially be Supreme Court types of decisions or cases?
Yes, there are a couple interesting issues, although they're kind of at this place where even if the Supreme Court agreed to hear them, they might not make it onto the 2024-25 oral argument schedule, in which case we'd be talking about it next fall.
Right.
But basically, there is a debate out of Arizona about protecting sacred lands, lands that are sacred to Native American tribes, and how to apply religious freedom protection to land, which can be tricky because you want to protect someone's ability to practice their religion, but what does it look like to do that if practicing their religion means not doing any sort of projects on just like a huge swath of land in the West? So the Supreme Court is going to be asked if they want to take up that case. You'll hear it referred to as Oak Flat or the Apache Stronghold case. Another one that I believe is out of Maryland is about religion and parental rights. Huge issue right now. It's a question of how school districts need to interact with parents when there might be faith-related concerns about material that's going to be presented. And that is bigger than religion. Parental rights is a big topic across the country. But that case is particularly interesting because it is a group of parents from Muslim background, Jewish background, Christian background, all coming together and saying, we don't think it's fair that we're not allowed to bring our religious beliefs to bear on what our children are learning.
Yeah, that'll be fascinating. That's an important one. We'll keep our eye on that one to see where that starts to bubble up a little bit. We know there are a few things that are coming that are big, one relating to the Second Amendment and weapons parts. Give us a little insight there.
Yes, I believe it was on Tuesday that the Supreme Court heard argument in a case about the ghost guns, which is where you order a gun parts kit and then can assemble a gun. And it has a lot in common with last term's bump stock case, where the Biden administration or presidential administration has tried to regulate this gun accessory as if it is a firearm under the law. In the case of bump stocks, the Supreme Court ended up saying, no, that wasn't an appropriate application of a law dealing with firearms. But the court watchers think that they are going to come down differently on this ghost gun case and say, yes, it does make sense to regulate ghost guns like regular guns because you're literally ordering everything you need to make a gun and then making a gun. And so it's interesting that they did pick up the Second Amendment case that had a ton in common with their most recent Second Amendment case. But I think that the court in that situation was saying, no, this is a pretty significant question, so we are going to revisit it very quickly after we just talked about it.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Well, we will check back in. We know there's a host of other things that are coming up, including some issues around death row cases, transgender children and teens, and hormone therapy. So we know there's a bunch of those that are all bubbling up, some environmental review processes as well. And Kelsey, we look forward to checking back in with you as the term starts to unfold and we see what the Supreme Court really does during this 24-25 term. Kelsey, as always, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to help.
All right. That's Kelsey Dallas joining us from the Deseret News, and always the best when it comes to insight into the Supreme Court, what's happening, what's not happening, and why. Important stuff. All right. We'll go ahead and step aside for some bottom of the hour news. Don't go anywhere. More Inside Sources coming up next. Stick around.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top local story this hour. Experts and researchers think building smaller and more affordable starter homes could help Utahns break through the price barrier in our housing market. Steve Waldrop, the senior advisor for housing strategy in the governor's office, says more dense, walkable communities with amenities around them could help, but not everybody's on board with that idea.
Density is a four-letter word, no matter how you spell it. In Utah and in other communities, we see a lot of pushback, and it's based on fear.
Other experts think it's time to revisit some zoning rules that make buildings smaller more difficult. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. President Biden saying his administration will stay in the hurricane disaster areas as long as it takes to respond, recover, and rebuild. He promised resources from the U.S. military as well as the Federal Emergency Management Agency.
At my direction, the Defense Secretary Austin has provided a range of capabilities both to Florida for Hurricane Milton as well as the states impacted by Hurricane Helene. When more capabilities are available, we assess some pressing needs. We can get whatever they need.
The president also says the federal government will go after scammers and price gouging in the wake of the storms. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down on the day now, 136 points. The NASDAQ is down by 23. And our KSL weather, we've got warm temperatures this afternoon. We might even tie the record for the date. KSL News Time, 1:31.
News doesn't just mean information or dates.
It's the story of our local history being told in real time.
Be a part of the story. This is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
We hope to be a part of your story. We have you covered on KSL News Radio.
My name is Brian King, and I'm running to be your governor because Utah is headed in the wrong direction, and we can do so much better. If you're frustrated by politics today, if you feel like politicians aren't listening to you, if you're looking for something different, for a leader who prioritizes common sense and bipartisanship, you have a place with us in this campaign. Join us and vote for Brian King for governor by November 5th. For the better.
Paid for by Brian for Utah.
You do countless things without a second thought to protect your family and home. Every time you're in the car, you buckle your seatbelt. Before the next load of laundry, you remove the dryer lint. When you head out, you always lock your doors. And one simple task, done far less often, can protect your family and home this winter. Schedule a furnace inspection by a certified heating contractor to check for safety and efficiency. A friendly reminder from Enbridge Gas.
Hey BYU fans, this is Mitch Harper. Undefeated BYU football is back from the bye week and ready to host the Arizona Wildcats in Provo. And to get ready for the Big 12 cat fight, visit your local Macy's grocery store for all of your game day needs. They've got great prices on all of your favorite game day items like the burger patties, made fresh dips, and more. And did you know your favorite tailgate foods are also now offered through Macy's Catering? They offer a wide variety of catering platters from the smoked meats, wings, and even desserts. Catering is available to order online or in store. So whether you're having a small or large party, Macy's has you covered. And never miss a deal when you sign up for Macy's Rewards program so you can get their weekly ads sent straight to your inbox each week.
Hi, this is BYU captain and defensive end Tyler Batty. It's football season again. Make sure to shop your local Macy's grocery stores for all your favorite tailgate foods.
Get game day ready with Macy's. Happy shopping.
Wendy's breakfast burrito has an entire breakfast in every bite. Fresh cracked eggs, seasoned potatoes, American cheese, cheese sauce, and sausage or bacon. So the first bite is like fresh cracked American cheese sauce. Bacon. And the second bite is like fresh cracked American cheese sauce. Bacon. And the third bite, you get the idea. The boss of breakfast burritos, gotta be Wendy's.
At participating U.S. Wendy's during breakfast hours.
Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. So at Consumer Cellular, we're lowering the price for those 50 and up. Now you can get unlimited talk, text, and data for $30 a line when you buy two. That's just $60 a month for 2 unlimited lines. So if you're 50 and up, make the switch and save. Come on, you've earned this. Call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com today. Requires 2 lines of service, age validation, and credit approval, subject to system and area limits, taxes, and other fees apply.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
Crews still on the scene of this crash westbound I-80 at 7th East to the left. And a surface street accident, possible injuries 9th South, 700 West. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
It'll be warm with high clouds. A high today of 88 could tie the record for the date. Highs will stay in the 80s through the weekend. 84 and mostly cloudy right now. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Tim and Amanda.
One of the big differences, I think, between reading a story online and hearing it from us, Tim, is that, you and I are allowed to share a reaction. We need to be able to say, what in the world were they thinking? So that people listening will know. We feel it too. When we read a story that sounds ridiculous, we're right with you. It sounds ridiculous.
Well, we get caught up, I'm sure just like our listeners do sometimes, in death scrolling on social media. And fact-checking it on your own is tough. The great thing about tuning in every morning and starting your morning with us on KSL is you can count on the fact that when that information comes out of the radio in your direction, it comes from reliable sources.
It's already been fact-checked.
Right. And that's not always easy when you're getting it online. Finding who wrote it, when was it written, has it been updated with the current facts of the day that change sometimes minute to minute, not just day to day.
Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9 on KSL News Radio.
Social Security is with you through life's journey from birth to retirement. As your life changes year to year, so do your needs. For over 80 years, Social Security has helped to meet your needs and is committed to improving access to the services that make a difference in your life. Today, you can verify your earnings, estimate your future benefits, apply for retirement, manage your benefits, and even change your address, all from the comfort of your home. Social Security's online services help put you in control with secure access to your information anytime, anywhere, allowing you to spend more time with family, friends, or simply just enjoying the day. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow. See what you can do online at socialsecurity.gov.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Tim and Amanda.
Do I look forward to reporting the news? Yes, insofar as it helps me understand what's happening.
We know that it's important information that's going to impact people's lives, and so that makes the job of reporting the news that day easier.
Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9 on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from inside sources.
With various regions across the world heating up, requiring American presence for deterrence, defense spending and budgeting is going to continue to be a hotly debated issue well beyond the presidential election. Whoever is sitting behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office is going to have to make some decisions about how we continue to fund what we continue to do. How do we maintain leadership and support for our allies all around the world, from Asia to Europe to the Middle East? And how do we do that without breaking the bank and ballooning already super high deficits? Michael O'Hanlon is the Phil Knight Chair in Defense and Strategy at the Brookings Institution and author of Military History for the Modern Strategist, America's Major Wars Since 1861. Has a great piece in The Hill, and I love the title of this, How the Next President Can Be a Cheap Hawk. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be with you. Greetings to friends out there in the Rocky Mountains.
All right. Well, you start with this lovely term called the cheap hawk. Describe that for us.
Well, I borrowed it from Newt Gingrich, as you may have seen in the article, the former Speaker of the House. And even though I'm a Democrat and he's a Republican, I've always admired his thinking on defense. He was a provocative thinker and very knowledgeable on technology. And he also had this great line in the 1990s where, he was trying to run as a leader of the Republican Party, which had been always seen as a pro-defense party, at least going back to Ronald Reagan, if not earlier. And he wanted to run and govern in that tradition, but he also recognized we had a budget deficit problem. And back in those days, there were some politicians, including Gingrich, who cared about the deficit, unlike today, where not too many still do. And so Gingrich was asked, are you a hawk? And what's that going to mean for the budget? And he said, well, yeah, I'm a hawk, but I'm a cheap hawk. And so what he wanted to do was be selective about where he might propose increases in the defense budget during the Clinton presidency. And that's what he did. And I actually think in that period of time, Democrats and Republicans worked together pretty well to manage the drawdown after the Cold War to a smaller military. Yeah. Of course, it was a less dangerous world back then than it is now, or than it had been in the Cold War. But that was the inspiration, and so I just liked the line and wanted to borrow it.
Yeah, I think it's a great one. And one thing we do on this show, we're equal opportunity offenders, and we're also equal opportunity commenders, regardless of the politics or whether they wear a blue jersey or a red or anything in between, because it's about getting to the right principles and the right policy. And I love the way you broke this down in your piece in terms of how do we continue to do the things that we need to do. But most importantly, how do we do it different, or how do we do it better? And so give us a few of those things that we ought to be maybe thinking again about in terms of not just being a big hawk, but being a cheap hawk.
Yeah, and I'll try to stay in this bipartisan tradition that I began by invoking Gingrich, because even though Donald Trump and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris don't have that much in common, the last two national defense strategies from the Pentagon have been very similar. The first one was under Trump and his first Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis.
Right.
The second was under Biden and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, who's still in the job. And in both cases, what they decided was that we should really prioritize Russia and China, and especially China, in our defense planning, because, we were seeing China in particular really grow and Russia becoming more aggressive. And so these countries could be much more serious concerns in the future, and the politics weren't going that well with either one. So that's the shift that took us away from the war on terror, from our preoccupation with Iraq and North Korea and countries like that, the so-called rogue states, as you may recall. We used to call them back in the 90s and 2000s. George W. Bush called them the axis of evil. Whatever you call them, they were the focus of our defense planning and our operations in both Iraq and Afghanistan through the 2000s. But Mattis and Austin, under Trump and Biden, have now moved us to this world where we're focused much more on China and Russia. And so that's led to a shift. But along the way, with China and Russia both being much bigger, more powerful countries than Iraq or North Korea or a country like that, the question then arose, well, how are you going to manage to deal with these threats with the same size military that you had for Iraq and North Korea? Because we didn't grow the military. And so people said, well, let's simplify it. Let's assume we're only going to fight one war at a time in one place at a time, either Russia or China or North Korea or Iran, but not all four at once. In fact, not even two of them at once. So we shifted from what was supposed to be a two-war capability to a one-war capability. And that's the way we sort of squared the circle on maintaining deterrence of a much bigger country with the same size military and a budget that was growing, but only growing gradually. And so now, unfortunately, we see Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran cooperating with each other a lot more. North Korea is selling Russia artillery, Iran selling Russia drones, China's selling Russia military production equipment, even though no weapons go from China to Russia. And they're all essentially viewing us as their adversary or their enemy. So what I've arguing now is we have to be ready for a war against more than one of them at the same time. It's not enough just to plan to fight one, because a second one might take advantage of our military preoccupation with the first adversary to cause trouble in their own neighborhood. So we at least need to be able to sort of hold the line and deal with the initial assault in a second or third or even fourth theater while we're fighting one big war. And the good news is I don't think you need a huge military buildup to do this. To have a holding force, essentially, a defense force and a holding force in, let's say, Korea, in the Middle East, and in Eastern Europe, while we might be fighting China over Taiwan, I think is adequate. And I try to show how you could do all this by adding maybe $25 billion to the annual defense budget and then keeping it at that higher level permanently. And that's a lot of money, but the existing defense budget's already $850 billion.
Yeah.
So if I'm in the right ballpark, we're only adding a few percent. So now it becomes closer to $900 billion instead of $850, but that's probably something we can afford, and we probably should afford it as a matter of prudence. Again, the goal is not to fight these wars simultaneously, but to prevent them, to deter them.
Right.
And we just have to make sure these other countries all know that if we go and have to deploy most of our forces to one place, we still have some limited capability left in the other regions.
Yeah, really important. I want to sneak in one last thing just real quickly as it relates to Russia. You pointed this out in your piece in The Hill, talking about actually having the stationing of either real American combat power there in the Baltic states, NATO, or some combination there. Just give us a quick 60 seconds in terms of what we should be thinking about or rethinking as it relates to that area.
Well, I know you got some great fighter aircraft out there in Utah, and of course, there are a lot of different kinds of military assets we could consider for Eastern Europe. But the recommendation that I made in regard to NATO, Eastern Europe, and deterring Russia is that I think we need some substantial number of Americans, let's say at least several thousand, in the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Right now, we've got some there on a temporary basis, but we really didn't have any at all before 2022. And we had Americans in Poland and Germany and Italy and the United Kingdom and a few other places, but nothing as far east as the Baltic states. And they are very small countries that are very exposed to Russia. They all border Russia. Two of the three have substantial Russian-speaking minority populations that Putin could claim some right to, quote-unquote, protect. And so I'm suggesting we should perhaps consider, let's say, putting an Army brigade and associated attack helicopters in one of those states, or maybe divvying up that brigade across a couple of them as a permanent deployment, a permanent stationing of those troops, and maybe adding that much additional capability to the Army force structure. You could also do it with Air Force planes. My main concern is having a few thousand Americans there all the time as a deterrent.
Okay. Fantastic insight. Michael O'Hanlon is the Phil Knight Chair in Defense and Strategy at the Brookings Institution, author of Military History for the Modern Strategist. And Michael, great perspective, great piece. You can check that out at thehill.com. But thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. That's Michael O'Hanlon joining us on the line. And that's an idea that's bipartisan. We got to be with our allies around the world. We've got to deter our enemies, and we can be a hawk, but a cheap hawk might be the way to actually get that done. We'll step aside. More Inside Sources coming up next.
KSL Broadcast Group contests are open to participants 13 years of age and older that are residents of Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and Nevada, unless otherwise specified. Employees or agents of the station, Bonneville International Corporation, or other area radio stations, or any entity associated with the contest may not enter. Persons who have won in the last 90 days from a station contest or event are not eligible. Full general contest rules are available at kslnewsradio.com.
Utah's biggest used RV Palooza is back and better than ever. This October 10th through the 12th at the Shops at Southtown, you're getting the best deals of the season on used travel trailers, fifth wheels, toy haulers, motorhomes, and more. Shop Gently Used RVs at the show and save thousands over fall pricing anywhere else. Find deals starting as low as $9,995, like on a 2021 Forest River Viking LS Series M238 LS tent camper. Plus, shop select new RVs at used pricing, not to mention blowout pricing on all remaining 2024s in stock. You'll also enjoy no pay payments until 2025 on approved credit. Finish your fall camping season in style without a single monthly payment. And if you've got a trade, we want it. Bring it to the show to get maximum trade-in value. We're even including a 1-year Fish Fix membership with every RV purchase. Your fast track to RV service repairs. And don't miss out on our Hunter Special section to keep your hunting season going strong. All this plus free admission to the Utah Used RV Palooza. 3 days only, October 10th through the 12th at the shops at Southtown. Open daily at 10 a.m. Sponsored by Bish's RV. See you there.
IVC is celebrating 20 years providing quality service in Utah. You've probably heard their saying by now, life starts when the pain stops. IVC is the most trusted interventional and vein center in the state, and they've been voted Best of Utah Valley 10 years running. The 7 physicians at IVC provide state-of-the-art, comprehensive vein care with many years of experience. The team at IVC takes the time to get to know you and your veins so you're comfortable with the right diagnosis and the right treatment. Patients are like family at IVC. You've also heard many radio ads over the years with real people describing how IVC has dramatically improved their quality of life by eliminating the pain and discomfort caused by varicose veins. Well, what are you waiting for? Don't let vein disease slow you down even one more day, because life starts when the pain stops. Visit ivein.com today to set up a free screening. That's ivein.com.
For over 22 years, speaking on business on KSL News Radio has been a beloved tradition, celebrating our heroic business leaders and Utah consumers who have helped build one of the strongest state economies in the nation. Now, under the stewardship of the Salt Lake Chamber and hosted by Chamber President and CEO Derek Miller, the program continues to shine a spotlight on those who make Utah's business environment dynamic and thriving. With his expertise and passion, Derek brings the stories of our business community to life. As part of the Salt Lake Chamber, Speaking on Business is proud to continue its legacy of highlighting inspiring stories, trends, and special guests. Support Utah businesses now and be part of Utah's thriving economy. More information can be found at slchamber.com. That's slchamber.com.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, an advisor in the governor's office says building smaller could help first-time homebuyers break through the price barrier. Second, President Biden promising areas hit by hurricanes help from the U.S. military as well as civilian agencies. And third, we could get a rare look at a comet this weekend. 84 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today, as it always is. I am Boyd Matheson. We're going to get behind the numbers a little bit in terms of the economy. We've been focused a lot today in terms of what's the status of the economy versus what's the story of the economy in terms of where we are. And, of course, there's a lot of politics that goes into that mix as well. But we want to start with the numbers, looking at the inflation rate, the jobless claims, all of those things. And, of course, there's only one person to turn to. It's Jeff Cox. And Jeff is always great to join us on the program. And he is the economics editor for CNBC.com, has a great piece up there now talking about all of this. Jeff, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Boyd, great to be here.
All right, let's dive into the numbers. Then I want to get to the story of the status and how that plays out. But let's start with the actual numbers.
Okay, so we got the Consumer Price Index report today. It's pretty key inflation barometer, a little higher than what we had expected. In fact, I had been looking for, what happens if this gets down to 2% year over year or below 2%, but it didn't. 2.4% 12-month inflation rate, up 0.2 of a point on the month. Those were both about 0.1 above the Dow Jones consensus, and the annual inflation rate for August was actually the lowest since February 2021, but still above that Fed target. You get down to core inflation, we're looking at 3.3% annual rate, much higher, and it was a 0.3 gain on the month. One report that we often just overlook, and you sort of keep one eye on it, but whenever it pops up, that this weekly jobless claims report, and that was much higher than expected. We saw claims come in at 258,000 for last week, and that was the biggest since August 5th of 2023. So that was an eye raiser, and so those are, of course, the two big things that the Fed looks at: inflation and employment. And not great news, not horrible news, but not great news in either aspect today.
Yeah, interesting stuff, and both of those. I want to kind of dig under those a little bit. Talk to us a little bit about the increase in terms of some of those costs, vehicles, food, because this is an interesting one. I think we've been talking today, Jeff, about this idea that part of it, people have kind of gotten comfortable with what the price of the cup of coffee is, or they're used to it. Whereas before it was kind of this jarring moment. But now we still kind of see some of these things, a jump in the food prices and some of those things, medical care services, apparel, making a big jump. Kind of break that down for us.
Well, this is the really insidious thing about inflation. This is how you get sort of that vicious cycle that repeats itself, that people get. They adapt and they get comfortable with the concept of inflation, and they just start to sort of, as you say, expect these things, and they adjust accordingly. Now, the problem is when they adjust accordingly, it's just the prices continue to feed on themselves because businesses, they expect inflation to keep going higher. Consumers, they expect inflation to keep going higher, so they demand more money, and then the more money businesses have to pay out, the more they have to raise prices, and it becomes this really vicious cycle that perpetuates itself. And I think that this is a concern of the Fed, of the sort of stickiness of inflation. As you mentioned, the biggest feeder of the inflation increase was a substantial jump in food prices. I think it was 0.4% that they rose. So, and then there were some things like egg prices are up like almost 40% year over year, and butter was up 2.8% this month. So, a lot of those kind of things, even with some of the downward drift that we've seen in gas prices, still very persistent, and still the kind of things that really make people worry about inflation. Now, a dozen of eggs isn't a huge part of the household budget, but it's just one of those things that's just like, wow, how much would just to pay like $5 or $6 for a dozen of eggs, and it just makes people kind of crazy, and it perpetuates itself.
Yeah, it's an interesting one to look at, and of course there's the political ramifications of all of that, of the story to be told and what's actually being felt around the table. Before I get to that, though, I do want to talk about these jobless claims, because, as you said, that it was an eyebrow raiser at minimum. What else do you read into that? What else should we be watching in the weeks ahead?
Well, I think that's sort of just right. You need to watch in the weeks ahead to see if it persists. Now, kind of cursory glance at this looks to me like a lot of it was driven by Hurricane Helene, as well as the Boeing strike. There were, as far as growth goes, just Florida and North Carolina combined about close to 12,000 just between those two states. And then, of course, Michigan, which is really impacted by the Boeing strike, that's about 9,500 gain there. So I think you would just want to look and see if this is something more fundamental, if this is just, these numbers can fluctuate a lot by the week. So, but it's, as far as concurrent or leading indicators go, jobless claims about as good as it gets. Yeah. So if these are the kind of things that persist, this is the kind of stuff that's going to rattle the Fed's cage a little bit more, and might make them more aggressive as far as rate cuts go.
Yeah. All right. Let's take a quick look at the story versus the status. What do you expect to see in the less than 4 weeks to go here?
At the next Fed meeting, the most likely scenario here is that they go for another quarter-point cut. I think that virtually without a doubt, unless something really major happened to the economy, some kind of unforeseen crisis, I think another half-point cut, another 50 basis point cut's completely off the table here. But I think a quarter-point cut is the most likely case. Seen some fluctuation in futures pricing over the last day or two. We're at one point up to about a 1 in 5, or even a little bit better than that, chance at one point of them not cutting at all. And Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic came out today and said he'd be fine with that if they didn't cut in November. So that was kind of interesting. Bostic is an FOMC voter this year, so he will have a say. So that's something to watch. If some of this data comes in and shows stubbornness in inflation, we get PPI numbers tomorrow, and and the labor market holding in there, that is going to be a conversation that they're going to have in November. Do we need to even cut here?
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Nobody better. Jeff Cox, economics editor for CNBC.com. Jeff, we always appreciate you making time for us.
Always a pleasure, Boyd.
All right, that's Jeff Cox joining us once again, and he is the best in the business, and we're very grateful he joins us here on Inside Sources to really help us get underneath the numbers and what do they really mean and what should we be watching. And again, I think the numbers are very interesting. We'll see what the Fed does, if they continue to cut another quarter or if they just hold and let things drift along. And then, of course, there's all the political implications for all of those. And I think the ones that have to be most concerning for those who want to assume the presidency are those that are impacting the households the most. And the fact that a lot of the increases were in food prices, in apparel prices, in medical care and services. Those are concerning things because regardless of what story you tell in terms of how good things are, if people have a status around the kitchen table that's different, you're not congruent, and that undermines trust. So a lot to get to there for sure. Well, that wraps up hour number 1 of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We'll step aside for some top-of-the-hour news. Don't go anywhere. We're going to go back to my conversation with Ibu Patel when we start the 2 o'clock hour. We'll be right back.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top story this hour. A Taylorsville police officer shot and killed a man in a parking lot last night. Officers had stopped the man in a suspected stolen car near 39 South and 300 West. The officer fired his gun after trying to make contact with the man. Another department, Unified Police, will now be investigating that case. A rare comet will be passing close to Earth on Saturday. The Sukinchuan Atlas was formed when the solar system was formed billions of years ago, but you'll be able to see it on Saturday about 45 minutes after sunset in the southwestern sky, and it stays there until Friday the 25th. After that, it won't come back for another 80,000 years. Our top national story this hour from ABC News, Hurricane Milton has killed at least 10 people in Florida. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas says the understanding is that tornadoes on the eastern part of the state are to blame for that. He says the storm has left deadly dangers behind.
Search and rescue is our highest priority, and we are also praying for those who are unaccounted for and for their safe return.
Mayorkas says there's significant water and wind damage across central Florida. He was speaking from Raleigh, North Carolina. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down on the day now 57 points, while the NASDAQ is down about 10. And our KSL weather. We could tie our warm temperature record for the day today. That's next. KSL News Time 2:01.
You know what's great about KSL's traffic coverage? Trained traffic reporters and real listeners.
Trading information and making the commute safer and faster for everyone.
Every 10 minutes on the 9s, we have you covered on KSL News Radio.
At Fisher Investments, we may seem like other money managers, but we're different.
What makes you so different than the rest of us?
We ensure clients receive unparalleled service at every step of the relationship.
Tell me more.
Our investment counselors focus on service over sales, prioritizing clients' needs.
How do you make money?
We don't sell any commission-based products. We have a simple management fee based on the value of our clients' portfolio. So we do better when our clients do better.
What about client portfolios?
We get to know each client, their finances, family, health, lifestyle, and more, and then we tailor a portfolio based on their specific goals and needs.
Your clients really come first then, huh?
Yes, we make them a top priority, Our goal is helping them achieve a comfortable retirement.
Wow, maybe we are different.
At Fisher Investments, we're clearly different. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com.
Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Are you ready to upgrade your home with stunning new windows in time for the holidays, but overwhelmed on how to begin? Look no further than Peach Windows. You know at Peach, they're all about giving you options. Peach offers a wide selection of wood windows, sleek modern black metal frames, European tilt and turn windows, plus much, much more. Let Peach help you find the perfect match for your home. They can work with your budget and personal style. Visit their showroom in Salt Lake City, 2940 South 300 West. That's 2940 South 300 West, and see for yourself. No pushy sales tactics, only guidance from the experienced staff. No inflated markups, just offers so-called discounts. See their 5-star reviews where customers rate them on their attention to detail through every step of the sale and installation process. Amazing home transformations begin with windows and doors. Serving Logan to St. George, just Google Peach Building to see for yourself. That's Peach Doors and Windows. Find them online, peachbuildingproducts.com, peachbuildingproducts.com. It's Peach Doors and Windows.
This is Jeff Stout with Fink and McGregor, Mortgages Made Simple. There are lots of mortgage lenders out there, so why choose Fink and McGregor? Here are some good reasons. We are a broker. That means we can shop loan terms on your behalf, including loan programs, rates, and closing costs. We make it easy. We can take your application within a few short minutes, either on the phone or in person, on our fast application website, 4minutemortgage.com. We can help sift through options to find the best solution for you. This can include loan programs, credit fixes, or loan strategies. We are fast, really fast. Most loans close within a couple weeks. Start to finish, we are here for you. Apply today at 4minutemortgage.com. Fink and McGregor, Mortgages Made Simple, 801-264-9494. That's 264-9494. Or on the web at finkmcgregor.com. NMLS 289115.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. And here's Ricky Meese.
We've had 2 crashes very close to one another. One in the cleanup stages at 9th South and 7th West. Also on 7th West, a rollover accident with injuries at 200 North. Fall is upon us, and Murdoch Hyundai is offering 1.99% for 5 years on the 2025 Tucson. Murdoch Hyundai in Logan, Linden, and Murray. MurdochHyundai.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
And warm today with high clouds. A high of 88 today could tie the record for the date. Highs will stay in the 80s through the weekend. 84 degrees and mostly cloudy. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
We often talk about the invisible threads that weave the fabric of our communities, that bind us together in times of joy as well as in times of adversity. And when we look at some of those critical threads, crucial threads, vital threads, it may just be time to think again about what we think we know about generosity, the force that it is, and what we rely on for it to do in the years ahead. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, it's time to think again about what you think you know about generosity. Generosity really is part of that invisible thread. So many things run on generosity that we don't necessarily think run on generosity. And so we're going to get under the hood and past the headlines on all of that. And we're really thrilled to have joining us back on the program once again, Eboo Patel, who, of course, is the founder and president of Interfaith America, the author of a book. If you haven't read it yet, you just need to go do it. Put it on your list today. It's called We Need to Build, Field Notes for a Diverse Democracy. And, of course, Eboo's also the host of the podcast, Interfaith America. And, Eboo, welcome back to the show.
Boyd, it's great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Always look forward to our conversations. You had a great piece at Deseret.com talking about this whole idea of generosity and what it drives and what it does. Break it down for us.
So listen, the genius of America is our civil society, and you know this so well in Utah. All of those wonderful charitable organizations, all of the people doing good for one another through their various faith communities. It's the fuel in the tank of American civil society, and it brings people together because every faith, every cultural tradition prizes generosity. But the sad thing is that generosity has been in decline for several years now, and we need to watch out for what that does to our culture and our nonprofit sector.
Yeah, and so let's break that down into both. Let's unpack both of those in terms of what it does to the nonprofit sector and what it does to society as a whole. Let's start with the nonprofit component. You took a deep dive look at that in terms of, as you said, it's beginning to decline a little bit. Break that down for us.
Yeah, so the percentage of Americans who volunteer their time fell from 30% in 2019 to 23% in 2021. It is on a declining slope right now. The percentage of U.S. households that made a charitable contribution fell from 65% in 2008 to 49% in 2018, another declining slope. So people are participating less in our society through things like volunteerism and through things like charitable donations. I remember growing up at the YMCA in the western suburbs of Chicago, and I know full well that so much of the reason I could participate in summer camp and after school care and basketball programs and Leaders Club was because other people gave money to support the Y and people volunteered their time. And it was also clear that when it was my turn, I had to step up and do that. It's a virtuous circle here. Other people donate and volunteer to help you experience positive programs. And then when you are able, you volunteer and you donate to help other people experience positive programs. And that's a virtuous circle that's not just good for a single YMCA, not just good for a single suburb like Glen Ellen where I grew up, but that's the virtuous circle of a civil society. I want to say something. Alexis de Tocqueville, the great French writer and intellectual who came to the United States in the early 19th century, he said, what makes America special vis-a-vis the nations of Europe, nations like England and France that he was familiar with, was people do things for themselves here. Whereas he said in England, a lord would do things, or in France, the government might do things. Those are important. But in America, you had an association who did things. Common people started associations. They started organizations. He called this the art of association. He said it was the mother science of America. And I really think the genius of our society is in our civil society. It's the potluck concept, Boyd, that you and I have talked about, that everybody brings a dish to the table. And that common table is a place of creative combination and enriching conversation. And right now, there are not as many people bringing their dish to the table, and that means that the feast is less delicious.
Yeah, and so as we look at that, as you said, it's not just the dollars and cents. It's not just keeping the YMCA or another institution up and functioning, as important as that is, but it's also this component of society. You talk about it in the context of your call as a Muslim to be generous, as so many other Christian, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, all of the different faith traditions have. But talk to us a little bit in terms of what do we lose as we become less generous in that interconnectedness of society, and as you said, bringing our plate and our dish to the table.
Well, in Islam, mercy is a key value. Being merciful to others is a key value. And in fact, one of the first lessons that classical Muslim scholars would teach their students is, if you are merciful to others, then the one who is in heaven will be merciful to you. So you need a place to practice that mercy. And it's our civil society, it's our nonprofit organizations that allow that opportunity. And of course, faith communities are a part of that. Right? So for me, my own Ismaili Muslim community is where I did some volunteering. The YMCA, where I taught people with physical handicaps how to swim. You cannot live the value of your faith unless you have a space in which to apply that value. And it's our nonprofit organizations that are that space. And here's the beautiful thing is when I was volunteering at the YMCA, I was meeting Jews and Christians and Buddhists and Hindus who were also doing the same thing. They were living the values of their faiths, their secular humanism or their Zoroastrianism, and we were all doing it together. So in that way, we are being more faithful to our own identity, and we are being more cooperative in the civic sphere. And that's what America is all about. And this Generosity Commission report, I would encourage you to look at the piece I wrote for Deseret which links to the Generosity Commission report, it shows that there are some bright spots. And so it's positive that there's been this growth in mutual aid. It's positive that things like Giving Tuesday have really taken off. But as far as our contributions and our engagement with the kind of physical institutions of our societies, Habitat for Humanities, YMCAs, things like that, it's been on the decline. But I'm an optimist, Boyd. I know you are too. So I'm looking for a revival, but we need to be honest about where things are at, and we need to energize to make things better.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is one of my favorite lines from your piece at Deseret.com is American civil society is where so many of us express our core identities and strengthen our faith. We always talk about taking your whole authentic self into the public square. It's not just for in your closet or in your shrine or in your mosque or synagogue or chapel. We have to take that out and this generosity is the opportunity to fully express that. Give us one last thought, Ibu, as you look at all of this in terms of generosity being an expression of what is best in the American spirit and what is the thing that should make us hopeful, not just an optimist, but hopeful, because hope is a virtue that we can develop. How do we become more hopeful in this whole process?
Follow the best of your identity and meet and seek to learn about the best of other people's identities and seek to practice that together. So in the Quran, we are told by God that God made us diverse nations and tribes that we may come to know one another, and we are meant to collaborate and engage one another in righteousness. So let us all do that together.
I love that. We talk about the most important part of the Constitution is we the people, what we decide to do together to form a more perfect union and better societies is exactly where we come to know one another and, as you said, to know God as well. Ibu Patel, founder and president of Interfaith America, author of We Need to Build, Film Notes for a Diverse Democracy, and host of the podcast Interfaith America. And again, check out his piece on generosity at Deseret.com. Ibu, as always, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I need to tell you one more thing.
Yeah, go.
Your generosity of spirit comes through every time I'm with you, and that is a deep and real compliment. I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. We will have you back very soon, my friend, and I know you have promises to keep and miles to go before you sleep, and just keep doing it. We're counting on you.
Take care, good friend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. That's Ibu Patel again from Interfaith America, and always appreciate those conversations because it does lead us to a better space, and we all need a little bit more of that in our country, in our communities, and right in our own homes. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. On the heels of Helene,
Thousands of volunteers are in Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas.
the cleanup for Milton begins.
The roof ripped right off Robert Hates' home.
We got hit by a tornado. It took out a building.
Get updates on the aftermath and how your fellow Utahns are pitching in to help. Hurricane Milton, mornings and afternoons on KSL News Radio.
At the UPS Store, we know being a small business owner means holiday time is still go time. Still get those orders shipped time. And still re-up on stamps and supplies time. That's why this upcoming holiday, while others close up shop, we'll be open. And happy to help you keep being unstoppable. Come into your local store today. Most locations are independently owned. Product services, pricing, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Be unstoppable.
Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. So at Consumer Cellular, we're lowering the price for those 50 and up. Now you can get unlimited talk, text, and data for $30 a line when you buy two. That's just $60 a month for 2 unlimited lines. So if you're 50 and up, make the switch and save. Come on, you've earned this. Call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com today. Requires 2 lines of service, age validation, and credit approval, subject to system and area limits, taxes, and other fees apply.
This is Derek Overstreet, the New Millennium Group, and host of Stop Working and Start Living Radio. If you're close to or in retirement and you don't have a tax plan, call us right now, 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. Listen, our country's been spending like never before, and the tax bill is coming soon. If you need an income tax strategy and a financial plan that will get you through the rest of your life, give my team a call, 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. If you want an investment plan that allows you to keep more of your gains and pay less taxes, give us a call, 888-999-6370. My team specializes in the type of plan that will get you retired 3 to 5 years sooner than you thought possible. So, get a no-cost tax analysis by calling 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. My team is standing by now.
Alpine Home Medical, we bring wellness home.
This is Jay Broadbent from Alpine Home Medical. I'm excited to let you know we're currently having a sale on power scooters. As we celebrate the spirit of freedom and independence, we want to make sure you have the chance to experience it. We have a wide range of power scooters designed to enhance your mobility, and they're all available at a discounted price. These special offers only come around every couple of years, and once they're gone, they're gone. Come visit us at any of our 11 locations to take advantage of these fantastic deals, or you can browse our selection of discounted scooters on our website. We're committed to providing the 5-star experience. We can't wait to assist you in finding the perfect power scooter. Visit us online at alpinehomemedical.com. That's alpinehomemedical.com.
Winter is coming, but there's still time to replace those drafty old windows before the cold comes and drives up your heating bill. Just make one call and take advantage of the Advanced Window Products Fall Special. $2,500 off on 10 windows or more, and that's $2,500 off their already low factory direct prices because at Advanced Window Products, they're the factory. Your windows are built in their facility right here in Salt Lake City. You're buying local, and with their lifetime guarantee, you don't ever have to call some faraway state for help. Advanced Window Products is right here, proudly backing up their work, so make one call, save on your heating bill, and get a rebate from the energy companies. Advanced Window Products offers 0% financing. They can even give you amazing new windows with no money down. And don't forget, $2,500 off their factory direct prices, but you have to call now. Advanced Window Products, 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100, or go to advancedwindows.com.
Any Hour Services can help you make sure your furnace keeps you warm this winter. Whether you need a tune-up, a repair, or a second opinion about replacing it, call Any Hour Services or visit anyhourservices.com.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, Taylorsville police say one of their officers was involved in a deadly shooting overnight. The officer's okay. The man they stopped in a possibly stolen car is dead. Second, search and rescue still the top priority after Hurricane Milton crashed through Florida. And third, the Yellow Lake fires covered 20,000 acres so far, making it Utah's biggest wildfire of the year. 85 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
Well, our southern neighbor, Mexico, recently held their election, and now, of course, the country has a new leader, Claudia Sheinbaum. And no matter who gets elected next in our country, they're going to have a crucial opportunity to really impact the violence, trafficking, the drug flow that plagues our countries. But it's going to cause us and force us to think again about what we think we know when it comes to doing things like stopping the narcotic traffickers, when it comes to stopping the violence at the border, or smuggling and trafficking of people. We have to do it a little bit differently. A fantastic piece in the Washington Post talking about this emergency in Mexico and what we need to do and what Washington can do to help. We simply have to rethink what we're doing and how we're doing it. Just hunting down the narcotic traffickers is not going to solve the problem, and history proves that out. And we're really thrilled to have joining us on the program today Eduardo Porter, who's a columnist and an editorial board member at the Washington Post. And Eduardo, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on. And, of course, Claudia Sheinbaum became the first woman president of Mexico. And obviously, there's a lot of violence that continues to roll on there. I love the way you approached all of this in terms of, hey, just getting the kingpins is not going to change the game. If we really want to focus on narcotics and human trafficking and fentanyl, how do we do that, and how should we approach that a little bit different?
Well, how do we do that? I mean, it really is a very big and difficult question. Both Mexico and the U.S. have been trying to do something about, organized crime and drug trafficking since at least the 1970s. And as you can probably see, there hasn't been much success in that department. There is still a very big crisis in the U.S. now due to the drug fentanyl, and there's a paroxysm of violence going on in Mexico due to organized crime increasingly having roles in bigger chunks of the economy, starting with drugs, but then moving to people smuggling and now shaking down all sorts of businesses from lime growers to avocado growers to tortilla shops. So evidently, whatever we've been doing for the last, 60, 70 years hasn't been working very well. So what exactly to do? If I knew how to do that, I'd probably be in a different job and earning more money. But I do think that we do need to rethink what we have been doing.
Yeah.
And what we have been doing, I think, has a couple of there's a couple of mistakes or erroneous strategies. And that stem in part from the fact that Mexico's problem is not exactly the same as the U.S.'s problem. And there has been very little communications to kind of set a joint strategy that addresses both. So right now, just to put it, the big U.S. problem is drugs. It's fentanyl. Fentanyl is killing tens of thousands of Americans per year, and it's an enormous crisis. And so I understand why it's such an important priority for the U.S. Mexico's priority, on the other hand, is about violence in Mexico and the increasing spread of organized crime. And those two are not exactly the same problem, and you don't necessarily address them in the same way. And so, the U.S. all its efforts have been to stop the flow of drugs through interdiction at the border and to go after drug kingpins in Mexico and get them extradited to the U.S. That has done very little. That has done very, very little to stem the violence in Mexico. In fact, in a way, it's contributed to the violence because every time you grab a big kingpin who had a sort of established an equilibrium over the crime in Mexico, well, then you have all the underlings fighting for the turf, other organizations moving into the turf of the former, the former kingpin used to control, and violence just gets worse. So that strategy really hasn't served Mexico. And I would argue that it hasn't really served the U.S. very much because, for all the kingpins that have been captured, the drugs keep flowing. So in any event, I think that needs to be rethought. And some other things need to be thought about as well as part of a joint strategy. I think one must think about the flow of weapons from the United States to Mexico because the drug cartels and the criminal organizations here are basically armed with U.S.-bought weapons. So, and there's several other, I think there's several other items that need to be thought about jointly in order to better address this problem that's just getting way out of hand.
Yeah, and I love that thinking in terms of some of the things that are flowing from the U.S. in terms of the weaponry. If they're all armed with U.S. weapons, that's an interesting thing that we haven't had any conversations about. And then I think you have to look at some of the things in terms of that joint strategy. What are other things that we should be thinking about as we start to have a different kind of conversation where we can get to this idea of a real joint strategy, not just each side kind of unilaterally doing what they think they need to do, but something that might actually get a little bit more to the essence and the core of the problem.
Yeah. Well, I think the first step is to start talking. Right now there's enormous mistrust between the two sides. You hear there's very, very little cooperation going on ever since this former head of the Army, General Cisneros, was captured in the U.S. in the Trump administration, and that set off an enormous negative reaction in Mexico. The president really reacted very badly, lashed out at the U.S. The U.S. eventually released this guy back. He was sent back to Mexico, and in Mexico he was just let free. But that really set the relationship on the very, very bad terms. And so there's been very, very little cooperation between the past Mexican administration and the Biden administration. So, like organizations like the DEA are almost persona non grata in Mexico these days. And so, first of all, we need to reestablish some sense of trust, and that requires, information sharing, and some sorts of like agreements of what's okay and what's off limits, to just restart the conversation. That's the first thing. And that's tricky because, say, part of the problem in Mexico, a big part of the problem in Mexico, is that it doesn't really have a functional criminal justice system. I mean, the very, very, very small share of crimes are ever brought, are ever prosecuted, and let alone ultimately adjudicated. So there is an enormous level of impunity in Mexico. And so without a functioning justice system in Mexico, it's going to be very, very hard to solve the organized crime problem and have the state recover the space that organized crime has taken over. So, and that's an issue that I'm sure that there could be some very valuable cooperation between Mexico and the U.S. in terms of like training and stuff. And in fact, there has been in the past under an old deal called the Mérida Agreement, which had a lot of flaws, but at least it had an interesting component about judicial reform in Mexico. But that is a very, very touchy subject, like having another country butting into how you're thinking about your judicial system is not an easy topic of conversation. So that requires a lot of trust. And I don't think, say, Mexico would happily go into that conversation if there's not a serious conversation about, hey, all the guns coming down from the U.S. And you guys seem to not be able to do anything about that because the Second Amendment and so on, and so you don't help us there. Well, why are we going to help you here? That kind of that's kind of like the tenor of the conversation right now.
Oh, that's fantastic. And those are all the strings and strands that we've got to get into the mix if we're ever going to really start getting things done there. Eduardo Porter, columnist, editorial board member at The Washington Post. You can check out his piece at thewashingtonpost.com. And Eduardo, thank you so much for joining us today. Fantastic perspective on this one.
Thanks very much for having me. Have a good one.
All right. Great perspective there. And we're going to step aside for some bottom of the hour news. More Inside Sources coming up next. Stick around. We'll be right back.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. The Yellow Lake fire has now burned 20,000 acres, far more than any other wildfire in the state this year. KSL News Radio's Michael Commit reports.
78,000 acres have burned in Utah this wildfire season, and the Yellow Lake fire accounts for 20,000 of these acres. It's currently 21% contained, but record high temperatures and zero rain have made putting it out very difficult. Fortunately, the fire hasn't grown over the past 24 hours.
Firefighters are warning hunters who plan to camp north of the Mirror Lake Highway between the Yellow Pine Trailhead and the Highline Trail to use extreme caution right now. Utah could have 4 million people by the time we host the Winter Olympics again. The Gardner Institute at the University of Utah says we should cross that 4 million population mark in 2033. The report also says Utah will likely add 330,000 new jobs by then. Our top national story this hour. Hurricane Milton left a trail of destruction through Florida, including at least 10 deaths. Kevin Guthrie with Florida's Division of Emergency Management says rescuers are still looking for victims in St. Lucie County.
They worked before the storm, during the storm, and they're going to continue to work until we make sure that anybody there that needs to be rescued will be rescued.
3 million people were left without power by the storm. Crews, though, have been making good progress getting service restored. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average closing trading today down 57 points, while the NASDAQ was down about 10 points. And our KSL weather. It's been a warm day. We could tie our temperature record before the day's done. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:31.
We hope you have the right app on your phone for news. You probably have dozens.
But the KSL News Radio app, well, it makes our live stream super easy.
Plus, our talk shows are right there as podcast for your workday.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
Don't you deserve health care you can count on?
Well, you can count on United Healthcare with Medicare plans that fit your life today and as your needs change tomorrow. You can enjoy reliable coverage and low out-of-pocket costs with a Medicare Advantage plan from United Healthcare. United Healthcare Medicare Advantage plans. Made for Utah, trusted everywhere. The Medicare annual enrollment period ends December 7th, so go to uhc.com/Medicare today.
Already, Dee and I have two very special events planned for Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. We've got a birthday and we've got an anniversary to celebrate in the month of October. And of course, it just wouldn't be a grand celebration without Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. And sometimes, too, you just need, not want, you need the perfectly cooked steak. Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, nobody does it better. And it's prepared exactly the way you want it. Now, Dee, she likes her steak a little more well done than I do. I like mine medium. I like ribeye. She likes hers a filet, and sometimes they will butterfly it so it's cooked absolutely to her taste. Then those side dishes are off the charts. The dessert, you've got to save room for dessert when you're going to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. This is the time, just like Dee and I have done, make your reservation. Celebrate that great occasion at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, downtown Salt Lake City, and of course, Hotel Park City.
At Macy's, we're proud to be local and support local. Carrying local products and produce is important to us. We are proud to support our local growers and bring peak freshness to you and your family. To make shopping local easier for you, we have added Utah Proud tags beneath local products. As you shop our stores, look out for the tags as you shop and show your pride for local Utah companies and growers. Thank you for shopping local yourself by shopping at Macy's. Macy's, happy shopping!
The KSL News Radio Movie Show comes to My Hearing Centers this Friday from 10 to 1. But first, discover what My Hearing Centers can do for you. My Hearing Centers uses advanced technology to diagnose and treat hearing loss. These comprehensive evaluations determine the best treatment options. Then enjoy lifetime support with regular check-ins, cleaning, and maintenance. Call My Hearing Centers at 801-701-1629. 801-701-1629 for more details. My Hearing Centers has offices from Ogden to St. George.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meeks.
We have unusual delays. I can't find what's causing them. It's southbound I-15 from Murray through Midvale. An accident called in by a KSL traffic trooper in South Salt Lake, taking westbound traffic down to one lane at the intersection of 33rd South and 9th West, and an accident at the on-ramp to southbound I-15 at 33rd South on the right. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Warm today with high clouds. High of 88 could tie the record for the date. Highs will stay in the 80s through the weekend. 84 degrees, mostly cloudy right now. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, both of the presidential candidates and their running mates are spending a whole lot of time and a heck of a lot of money in the state of Pennsylvania. It's obviously going to be a close race there. That's going to be crucial when it comes to the Electoral College. Getting to the White House without going through Pennsylvania is a pretty tough one. And so we're going to go on the road with our good friend David Drucker, senior writer at the Dispatch, based in Washington, D.C., but he is on the road for us. He is traveling across Pennsylvania, looking at all the different nuances of the race. And David, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to be back, Boyd.
All right. I was going to ask what the beverage of choice is, what the supply of sunflower seeds and beef jerky is, but we'll save that for another analysis. But what are you seeing across the state of Pennsylvania?
Yeah, it's been interesting. We are now I'm actually driving into Easton, which is just outside of Allentown. So we're now on the east side of the state. We went from west to east, started in Pittsburgh. And it's a competitive race. We've talked to Democrats and Republicans. Both sides tell us they're cautiously optimistic. And I think both sides are believable. I mean, we know when we're being spun, and there's always a little spinning involved. But, I would say that we've seen a better organization, a better voter turnout operation from the Democrats, from the Harris team, and the county parties here in Pennsylvania. I mean, that's just the way it is. But last night in Reading, Pennsylvania, we covered a Trump rally, and look, they filled up most of the seats. It was about 6,000 people out of 7,100 capacity, and I mean, they are dyed in the wool for Trump, and they've all got the T-shirts and the hats and the sweatshirts and the hoodies, and they are enthusiastic, and so we're seeing different kinds of enthusiasm from both sides, and some of the information is conflicting in that what we hear from Democratic operatives and Republican operatives is, I'd rather be us than them, and here's why. And, this thing will finish close, we think. So, somebody's got to win and somebody's got to lose. So it doesn't mean necessarily anybody's wrong. But obviously somebody's going to be proven just a little bit more right than the other. And, we're going to have to wait for the votes to be finished counting.
Yeah. And so as you listen to those and you know your way around, I don't think anybody could spin you, David. So I'm not worried about that. It's interesting to look back at how this has gone. Of course, former President Trump broke the blue wall in 2016, picking up Pennsylvania along with Michigan and Wisconsin. And are you getting any sense, is that the reason that people are only cautiously optimistic, or is this just one of those that, like you said, someone's going to be a little more right, but it's not going to be by much?
Well, it's a good question, and I will tell you what we hear the most from both sides. So Democrats tell us that they've got PTSD left over from 2016, that, they can feel good or just think they're supposed to win, although, they explain that the enthusiasm and difference between Harris and Clinton is like night and day. But they just talk about this feeling of 2016 and how shocked everybody was, even though in retrospect they can now see, why it happened. But so Democrats, PTSD about 2016, and Republicans, it's kind of like, well, I mean, we lost 4 years ago, so it means we're not invulnerable,
Yeah.
And people can write, or people can talk all they want about, how Trump has this high floor and the loyalty of the working class vote and an expanded support among non-white voters, and how he's such a good fit for so much of Pennsylvania geographically. But, you've got the suburbs of Philadelphia and the suburbs of Pittsburgh. And, we're up here in the Lehigh Valley where it's very mixed, but Democrats feel like they're going to do very well. And so, we just get it, different reasons on both sides, and just understanding that, sometimes you just don't know how it's going to go, and both sides have been disappointed before, I guess, when they didn't think they would be.
Yeah. Yes, and I think that's a fascinating, and it drives campaigns absolutely crazy. The mental gymnastics of all of that, I think, gets pretty interesting. And give us a little bit of that gymnastics, David, as it relates to the path. Absent Pennsylvania, what does the Harris ticket have to count on? And absent Pennsylvania, what does the Trump campaign have to do?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, it's been a long time since Pennsylvania voted differently from Michigan and Wisconsin. So the feeling is, notwithstanding some of the polling discrepancies or divergence this week between Michigan and Wisconsin and then Pennsylvania, is that if whoever's winning Pennsylvania is winning those other two states. Now, we can play electoral college, puzzle games where, well, if the loser of Pennsylvania still wins North Carolina and then somebody else wins Nevada and we can do all of that. But I would look at it like, this. Harris can win Nevada where Biden could not, but she still might not win Nevada. Arizona and Georgia, I need to check on. It's been a few days since I've talked with my insiders. But obviously, she's still really playing catch up in those two states. North Carolina is always close. Of course, now it's a bit scrambled because of the devastation from Hurricane Helene.
Yeah.
But let's just put it this way. Republicans have won it ever since, Obama won it in 08, and otherwise it's close, but it's just been a tough nut for Democrats to crack. And so you just come back to these Great Lakes states where it's just super competitive. And, and there are some differences and nuances this time around. I mean, obviously the Arab vote or the Middle Eastern vote in Michigan could be complicating for Harris. But it depends. And, Wisconsin's interesting. So it's not that I don't want to answer your question or I can't necessarily. I don't think that the same sort of voters are in various places.
Right.
And it's just so tight that it's not as simple as saying if you don't win here, you win over here, because there are not enough states in play to surprise us, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Give us one last perspective, because I know you're always looking at the underneath the headlines components to all this. Are there some things, especially as it relates to Pennsylvania, are there some things down ballot that might impact up ballot as it relates to this race, or is this strictly going to be a top of the ticket kind of thing as you've been crisscrossing the state?
Listen, I just think this is top of the ticket. The only thing I can say is, in an even Steven race, if it's really even, sometimes the better ground game can get you the extra half a point you need. And it's not that the Republicans have nothing. It's just that the Trump campaign largely farmed things out to outside groups. They do have their own network. It is busy. Republicans are pushing the early vote, the mail-in vote, where last time they did not. But you can't vote twice. So if they get a bunch of people to vote early, on the one hand, it means that's a vote locked down that won't not vote on Election Day for some reason or another. Right. At the Trump rally last night, there was so much discussion. Please vote early because you never know on Election Day, somebody gets sick or you get caught up at work and all of a sudden you didn't vote. So, there's a reason why you want to do that. But the Democrats are also doing all the things that they always do, and everything's just centralized. And ground game is something that is better centralized. Yeah. What the Trump campaign is doing is using the attendance at these rallies, and they've got volunteers all over the arena, taking names and getting more volunteers. But that just doesn't always necessarily work as well. But if there's anybody who can overcome that sort of thing, it's Donald Trump. I mean, it's just he's got that kind of a following and personality. So, and look, he's got a competently run campaign. The campaign itself is competent. I stand by my contention based on talking to Republican operatives, never mind Democrats, that they should have let the RNC do with the ground game what it's been doing. It was effective. It won the race for Trump once and nearly helped reelect him, even though he lost. So that was not the problem. But so when you talk about underneath the hood, there are some competitive congressional races. There's obviously competitive Senate race, Bob Casey versus Dave McCormick. But this is all top of the ticket stuff, and it's just going to dictate. It doesn't mean that underneath somebody can't overperform, or a Democrat won't win when if Trump wins, or a Republican won't win if Harris wins. But this is a top of the ticket game here.
Yeah, great perspective as always. Working its way across Pennsylvania, looking at that urban-rural divide, looking at this key battleground state. And as always, David Drucker, thanks for carving out a little time on a busy day, a busy travel schedule for you this week. Thanks so much for joining us as always.
Anytime. Thank you.
All right, that's David Drucker, senior writer at the Dispatch, and he is on a road trip across Pennsylvania. It is going to be one of the swingiest and most critical of the swing states, and it is neck and neck. We'll continue to track it and watch it. And as David pointed out, the ground game, the discipline of a campaign often makes the difference in this kind of race. We'll see how that plays out. We'll step aside for a quick break. More Inside Sources coming up next.
The Management Minute is a service of the MBA program in the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. I'm Professor Scott Hammond. Almost every day I get a request from a colleague, student, publisher, or publicist that is urgent. Urgent for them, but not always urgent for me. How can we know which requests are really urgent? Some asked, what is the cost of a quick response? Sometimes more time makes for better quality responses. Others ask, how flexible are the deadlines? Many deadlines are artificial, but some are really hard. Others ask, what is the cost of the delay? Or what is my responsibility to help that person? One CEO I know used to say, if it's urgent for someone else, it's urgent for me. He would always respond within 24 hours, often with late-night emails. Learn how to lead in an ever more urgent world with an MBA from Utah State University. Go to utahstatemba.com. That's utahstatemba.com. I'm Scott Hammond. Hope to see you in one of our classes.
Join KSL in the movie show this Friday from 10 to 1 at Advanced Window.
Did you know that your largest investment asset might not be your retirement account or home? I'm Jay Jackson, CEO of Abacus Life. Most people don't realize that their life insurance policy is actually an asset they can sell. But for almost 20 years, Abacus has been purchasing life insurance policies from seniors just like you. We've even created a free policy value calculator at abacuspays.com so you can find out in seconds what we might pay for your policy. There are no fees and no obligations, just information. Knowing the value of your life insurance policy is as important as knowing the value of your home, your equity portfolio, or your finances in total. Discover the valuable information you need to understand the current market value for your life insurance, and then get real value from your life insurance when you need it with Abacus. Visit abacuspays.com to learn more and use our free policy value calculator today.
Higher taxes, soaring inflation, record low interest rates, and the skyrocketing cost of healthcare. The list goes on. Retiring successfully today is a lot more complicated than ever before. Learn how you can tackle the biggest challenges that you'll face in retirement today. Don't miss a special edition of Retirement Solutions Radio. It's this Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, right here on KSL, News Radio 1027.
How do they get so excited about 50 yards? Think of what you could sew with that. But you need a really great sewing machine, a Bernina.
Get Bernina sewing, serging, and embroidery machines and accessories at fantastic prices. The Bernina Super Weekend Sale.
Don't miss this Dave's Bernina Super Saturday one-day event. This is the biggest sale of the year at Dave's Bernina in Provo and St. George. Saturday, October 12th. The lowest prices. Buy one, get special add-on deals, tremendous bargains on trade-ins and demo machines, and discounts on accessories. Featuring great financing offers from short-term no-interest plans to 1.9, 2.9, and up to 3.9% for 72-month options on certain machines. One day only, Saturday, October 12th.
Dave's Bernina, 691 East St. George Boulevard and 2017 North 550 West in Provo.
Come see the most revolutionary machine in the world, the Bernina 990.
Don't you love this time of year? Fabulous fall colors amongst Red Rock views and cedar breaks in Dixie National Forest. You should take a drive where you'll no doubt enjoy 4 scenic highways connecting you to the most amazing fall colors you will ever see. Put the U back in Utah, because it's all about the journey you create. This fall, see you in Cedar City. If you like nature, start your journey with a stunning hike for the best scenic views and vibrant colors. Or how about mountain biking and OHVing? You will enjoy all the fun fall events, like the charm of an organic farmer's market. Be sure you include a visit to the best pumpkin patches in the West. And don't miss out on the annual sheep parade down Cedar City's Main Street, October 26th. You will definitely get it all this fall in Cedar City. To plan your journey and for Cedar City's updated fall color report, activities, and cool foodie places to go, visit cedarcity.com.
Winter is right around the corner. And when it arrives, you need to have a way to stay warm. What if you don't have any housing at all? A winter's night outside can be fatal. If you're in Utah County, there will soon be a new resource, the Utah County Warming Centers. Opening October 15th, these are not shelters. They're places for adults experiencing homelessness to come in from the cold and stay alive. Community Action Services and Food Bank is organizing volunteers and blankets for the warming centers. They need your help. Reach out online at casfb.org for more details on how you can volunteer or donate. Other resources are also available for families with children or the elderly in Utah County, too. Come in to Community Action Services and Food Bank to connect with those. Warmth on a winter's night is a basic, life-sustaining need. Sign up to volunteer to the Utah County Warming Centers. Visit casfb.org today. Community Action Services and Food Bank.
Let me ask you a question. You have a best friend? How big would it shock you if somebody told you that your best friend just killed somebody?
911, what's your emergency? Someone on the other line said they kidnapped my son, and they're demanding $500,000.
On September 12th, 1995, 12-year-old McKay Everett disappeared from his home in Conroe, Texas. It was a crime that shocked the community because the suspect was so unlikely, so unexpected.
Former high-ranking police official, he'd run for sheriff at one point.
Law enforcement personnel were pretty much split down the middle over whether or not he actually did this.
And to this day, McKay's mother, Paulette, still feels that justice was never truly served.
I've asked myself so many times, what in the world happened?
Ransom is available now. Listen at ransompodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, the Yellow Lake fire is Utah's biggest this year. It's now posing a threat to camping areas north of the Mirror Lake Highway. Second, the Gardner Institute says Utah's population will likely reach 4 million the year before we host the Winter Olympics again. And third, search and rescue operations continue in Florida after Hurricane Milton. 84 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today. As always, I am Boyd Matheson. As we round out the program today, if you've missed anything along the way, this is one of those days where you got to go check out the podcast when it goes up later today. Just go to kslpodcast.com, click on Inside Sources, and we conveniently have for you each of the segments of the show just carved up into nice little bite-sized pieces. And so you'll get everything that you may have missed, or with some of our guests, you just want to go back and listen to it again. Our conversation with Eboo Patel in terms of the fabric of this country, what we need to get back to in terms of generosity, is one that I've actually listened to. And you go back to, we had Catherine Rampell joining us from the Washington Post. And this was the interesting conversation of the day for me, where I really started to rethink what's going on. We talked about an interesting trend in the presidential race. Historically, the Republicans, when voters are asked who will do a better job handling the economy, that has been one where Republicans have traditionally done better. In the last few cycles in a pretty significant manner. And earlier this year, when it was a former President Trump against current President Joe Biden, the difference was stark and the gap was wide when it comes to who is better situated to handle the economy. Now with Vice President Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, and with the economy kind of shifting a little bit, that has changed. It's also changed, I think, because of what has been done and what has been left undone by both campaigns. I think the vice president has done a better job of talking about the economy and the issues that are most important to voters and framing them in a little different way. So let's just do this from a strategy standpoint. Again, set your politics aside for a minute. When Joe Biden was the candidate, he wanted to tout the things he had done, talking about pieces of legislation and what that would mean. Wanted to talk about infrastructure and that bill. But the problem was that what President Biden was saying and what the American people were experiencing were vastly different things. And so while he was trying to say, hey, isn't it great? Isn't it good? We're awesome. Look at all of this. And the American people were sitting there saying, it doesn't feel that way to me. I'm having a hard time making budget. I'm having a hard time getting groceries. I'm having a hard time getting to the end of the month with any money left. So that was a problem. Vice President Harris has come in and has tweaked the language just a little bit in terms of how she's talking about it. There's also been an interesting phenomenon, and that is just kind of this settling. It's never a good settling, but it is settling. The American people have settled in with where we are because of inflation. So the sticker shock factor of the price of eggs or a cup of coffee or a gallon of gas or a home price, all of those things have sort of leveled, and people have become comfortable, not happy, but comfortable with where we are. So because of that, the advantage that former President Trump held has been cut in about half. I think the other contributing factor to that is what the former president has been talking about and not talking about in terms of inflation and the cost of living. And so part of this ends up being campaign strategy. And so this was the conversation we had with Catherine Rampell from the Washington Post. We also had a similar conversation with Jeff Cox, who always joins us from MSNBC, who is one of the great financial thinkers, economic thinkers on the planet. And we're always glad that he joins us on the program. And he raised some really interesting things. Again, the inflation rate was 2.4% in September, so it was a little better than expected. Jobless claims, highest since August of 2023. So that was a little unexpected. But underneath the hood of those numbers was a 0.4% jump in food prices and a 1.1% increase in apparel prices. Those are things the American people take notice of. Medication prices also went up. And so suddenly you've got all of these conflicting numbers going on. And so then it becomes not just what is the status of the economy, but what is the story? And I don't think either campaign is doing all that well when it comes to telling the story of the economy. I think former President Trump has gone to a very negative bent and just saying it's awful, it's horrible, it's terrible. And that may be true in some sense. But what he's selling, people aren't necessarily buying. Same is true with Vice President Harris. She's telling a very positive story. People also aren't buying that. So how the economy flows is going to have a huge impact on where this race ultimately lands. Well, that wraps it up for us on Inside Sources today here on KSL News Radio. I'm Boyd Matheson. Thanks for joining us. And as always, as you go out into the world today, make sure you see something that inspires, say something that uplifts, and do something that makes a difference.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Good afternoon, 3 o'clock at KSL News Radio.